Most men trust the mask that they wear more than the man that they actually are. So when they feel this unnecessary amount of pressure on themselves, it's really because they've been wearing a mask the whole time and they're afraid to be real with themselves about it. You see, a man feels most attacked when his identity, the really the belief of who he is attacked. So most men don't actually have the courage to figure out who they are. And what I have observed in many ambitious men, though we are ambitious, we have the tendency to overly focus on making sure that we have, a business like money, which is good for provision, to be able to provide for ourselves, to be able to provide for our loved ones, you know, um, overly focus on accomplishing. You see, and what happens when that with that is it creates a unnecessary amount of pressure and really a inability to actually turn the switch off, as we like to say, because many of us that are ambitious, we know how intense we could get. We know how focused we could be. And when you look at the etymology of the word focus, it is a hearth of fire. So when you're intensely focused, the fire within you is so burning hot that intensity rises and it'll burst you if you overly focus on something. You see? So many men are stuck in the same cycles of life, self sabotaging, because the amount of pressure that they put on themselves to succeed kills them. And many men will implode because of that. You see, and there's a subtle attachment to their accomplishments. They don't know who they are if they don't accomplish. They don't know what life is like if they don't accomplish. But the reality is, when you accomplish and you're in this state of man, you never actually express who you are. You don't accomplish because that's who you are. You accomplish because you're looking to feel accomplished so you could be the man that you know yourself to be. So for a moment, for a season, you feel like him. You feel like all the potential that you've had within, that you've always known yourself to be, you finally live up to that image of man. But then that voice inside of you always comes back. It always comes back to tell you you're not enough. There's more work to be done. Instead of allowing yourself to be curious about who the Most High made you to be, you chase accomplishment because accomplishing is what defines you as a man. At least that's what you tell yourself. Anything that we give our power to will have power over us. Anything that we blame, anything that we curse, you know? And we have to be careful because in this society, we've been taught cardinal solutions will fix spiritual issues, which is never the case, which is why many men even start their self improvement journey in the first place. They come from a place of such insecurity that they feel the need to be ambitious because ambition, accomplishments, achievements seems to be the way that they'll finally be able to be themselves. Rather, finally be able to be loved, finally be able to stop wearing the mask. And they're looking for subtle permission through these accomplishments to be who they're truly meant to be. You see, and many entrepreneurs really understand that when you're an entrepreneur, there's no really such thing as getting ready, you know? The concept of having to feel ready, it doesn't really exist. You just kind of do shit and then eventually you know, you find yourself being exactly where you want to be at. Nothing really qualifies you in this life besides a calling that you have to the Most High. And many people ask you, well, what is your calling? What is your qualifications for the job or for the position or whatever it is that you're trying to do? What authority do you carry? And you have to be so convicted in that calling, or else people will drag you off that calling. And many men struggle with that. They feel like they need to be qualified. They feel like they need to be chosen. They feel like they need to be ready before they're actually ready. When in reality is faith is the ability to trust the Most High even when the evidence is not there. And even take it a step further, your self-belief has to be able to carry you through those moments of uncertainty. Most men cannot deal with uncertainty because they're so attached to the meanings of certain outcomes, to the mask that they're wearing. It is impossible, it feels impossible to them to actually be themselves and still get everything they want in their life. And I talk about a lot on this channel of being a character. Many men think they are strong, but they're not actually strong. A lot of men will boast in suffering, and they have this false idea that suffering is normal. You have to suffer for accomplishment. That's not true at all. That's not true at all. Actually, in life, you want to be as peaceful and honest with yourself as possible, which honesty and truth is going to lead to you being peaceful, being at peace, being rooted in reality, that anything can be given and taken away from us at a moment. You know, the truth is, many men trust the mask that they wear more than who they actually are. So when men say they want to be disciplined, when men say they find themselves inconsistent, lazy, anxious because they feel like they're always on, you know. Many ambitious men end up sabotaging because they want to surrender control over themselves so they could take off the burden of the mask that they're wearing. And you'll see this a lot in relationships. A lot of men will subconsciously allow their woman to start leading, and that leads to a lot of chaos in their life because the woman immediately starts to pick up on the man letting go of control, and that starts to make her to panic. You see my point? Because a woman has a very survivalist nature. So she's gonna always operate in what's best for her and her survival because she is the weaker vessel to a man. So the way a man mitigates the burden of responsibility and leadership is accepting that and this is for the ambitious man, that he is a leader. That he is a leader. And instead of running away from leadership, accepting it. Because a lot of men that are leaders wear this mask. They understand responsibility, they understand that they're leaders, but they never really fully internalize it because internalizing that they are leaders forces them to take off the mask and express that leadership is a gift that they have. A leadership is who they are, you know. And sometimes it's a threat to everything they've built themselves on. If let's say they felt inadequate most of their life, which is why they wear the mask in the first place, you wear a mask to protect yourself from potential enemies, you know, also from yourself, from your image being damaged, so they're not really in a position of power, they're in a framed position of power. They wear the mask because they're afraid of who they are. They're afraid to walk in who they are because puts them in that puts a certain expectation, a certain standard on them that they feel like they will fall short of. And it really ties to perfectionism. If you feel this way, you feel like you need to be perfect because you understand responsibility. But no matter what, the best thing you could do is just show up honestly. Show up as as your best. But you never try to show up as your best. You just show up as your best because you internalize who you are. You trust yourself. Most men don't want discipline. Most men want self-trust. Most men don't trust themselves. They don't trust their gifts. They don't trust what they've been stewarded, what they've been given. So the ambitious man's struggle is he has this power, he has this great self-belief, but that self-belief has really been put into the mask, you know. But internally, he wrestles with himself daily about how much he does not trust himself, waiting for the moment he fucks up, waiting for the moment that something actually fills his life, gets rid of the imposter syndrome that he's dealing with, waiting. And that is very suffocating. So the idea of the mask is, he'll go out in public and he's socially anxious. because he's waiting for his fall. He believes that subconsciously that the Most High is out there to really expose him, and that is really a curse if you ask me. If you have to live paranoid, really live under pressure, not being able to be who you truly are. There's a concept that many men will code switch, and code switching is basically, you know, diluting yourself to make others comfortable, which is why personally I cannot be in the workplace for too long. Or if I'm at a job, I have to be in some type of authoritative position or isolated position, because I cannot have someone hovering over me, constantly putting pressure on me to do things the way they want to do it, especially if they're incompetent, which is what happens to a lot of ambitious men that know they're competent, know they have self-belief. They usually find themselves in workplaces super talented, but never able to get over the hump, which is themselves. And a lot of the time is because they never have really accepted who they are. They've accepted the mask of who they are more than who they are. And the mask really blocks you from being vulnerable in relationships, which is not vulnerability, but open to relationships with great women, because you have to bring a certain level of warmth and you have to let go of control, and you really have to let go of certainty that you're not going to get hurt, because there's a risk with everything. You can get hurt. It affects you in business because you may feel like you always have to be in control. You can't trust the team that you chose despite you being a leader, despite you choosing them. You feel like without you, things don't work. And that's true, but that's because you set up the system that way. The mask that you've created is now your limiter. The mask that you've created to protect yourself, your image blocks you from the exact blessings that you want, from expressing who you truly are, because anything that is expressive doesn't feel like something you're trying to put on or something you're trying to do. You do it because that's who you are. So many men have never actually defined who they are, never said to themselves, I am a man who leads, I am a man that works hard. They don't define themselves by that way. And that's really, like I said, where the mask comes in, because the mask exposes them from, where the mask really holds them from really looking within and really understanding why they don't allow themselves to be. And more often times than not is because they don't feel accomplished enough to actually be themselves. And that is a reality that is very suffocating. It's very pressurized. Why would you feel pressure about building a life that you say you want? Why would you feel pressure to be in a relationship you say you want? Why would you feel pressure to be building a business that you say you want? Yes, it is hard. Everything is hard. That's true. It is hard. It does take sacrifice. But suffering, especially if you're choosing something that you're passionate about, when you choose something you're passionate about, it doesn't feel like suffering. It's almost kind of like, take me away from this, because I love it so much. It's hard for me to stay away from it. So the idea that a man has to suffer in that capacity, or even worse, like, there's this concept of like, you should be isolated in your 20s and just put your head down and basically don't have any fun. Some young men, especially my age group, they take that shit extreme and they block themselves from living life. And when they get accomplished, they realize, oh shit, I still don't know how to socialize. Oh shit, I still don't know how to have social connections. I still don't know how to lead rooms. Yeah, I'm accomplished, but I don't have the presence. I don't have the authority. I don't have the swagger that I'm really looking for. I'm still not myself. That is very exhausting to live. Very exhausting way to live. You see? It's very akin to superheroes. Spider-Man. If you guys, I just watched this, the trilogy over the weekend, the OG trilogy with Tobey Maguire. A part of his struggle was that he didn't allow Mary Jane into his life because he was afraid of his life would bring her. His life was dangerous. He understood that. So he said, fuck it. I'm going to make the decision for her. I know that if she comes into my life, there's a great chance that she dies. He could not handle that. So he allowed himself to really block himself out from love. And the struggle that he has within that movie in Spider-Man 2 is that he feels like to be a hero, he needs to struggle. That a hero's journey is to struggle. And he gives up Spider-Man the mask because he got tired of struggling. When in reality is at the end of the movie, he finally integrates, he gets Mary Jane, and Mary Jane's like, well, you never actually gave me the decision to decide whether I can actually be a part of your life. And in the third movie, he finds out when he finally takes off the mask, which is why when he's unmasked, when he's getting the key of the city, he says to himself, they love me. And it goes to show you the mask, though it's powerful, it blocks you from all the blessings that you're looking for. So really reflect and really reflect and ask yourself, the mask that I'm wearing, the man who wants to pretend to be strong instead of actually be strong, the one that feels like he is authoritative besides actually being authoritative, the one that feels like he is a leader instead of embodying a leader. What is the mask really protecting him from? And the answer to that question is you're protecting yourself from yourself.